Hi everyone, and welcome to another Cloud Takeaways. This time we have an interesting session by Gonzalo, but before bringing him in, let me take you through some things we always do. And that's basically a small introduction of who we are and what we do. Normally, Henry would be here as well. Today I will be here alone because Henry is busy doing other stuff. So I'm Mike van Graag. I'm one of the founders of the Dutch Cloud Meetup. And basically started the cloud takeaways of working with you guys in sharing cloud technologies and sharing cloud knowledge all over the world. And then also a special thanks to our sponsors. So we have 4 sponsors at this moment. That's Betabit, we have SPS here in the Netherlands, we have 350, and we have Ibis, the software company. So if you are watching this session, you could be watching it from LinkedIn, from YouTube, or even from Twitter. If you have any questions during the session, during the talk, just ask them in the appropriate chat windows. We will make sure that we ask those questions to Gonzalo after the session so that he can answer them for you as well. So be sure to just type them into the chat as well. So without further ado, let me bring in Gonzalo as well. Hi, Gonzalo.
Hey, Mike. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you for being here as well. How are you doing?
I am fine. And you?
Great. Yeah, I'm great as well. So are you ready? I know it's early on your side.
Come on, I am ready.
Yeah.
Yes,
Are
let's
you
go.
ready? You had enough coffee?
Yes, I know.
Okay, so if you share your screen now, we'll make sure it's shared in the stream and then we
Sure.
can start. Yes, I see. Okay, it's in the stream.
Yep.
It's up to you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So let's start. Today we're going to talk about my favorite service, which is Azure SQL DB, and then I will explain you why it's my favorite service. I very often receive this question like, hey, I have my SQL Server. What will be the difference if I use a service? And what will be the difference with the SQL that we already know? I will for sure answer that question during our session. First of all, I will introduce myself. I am Gonzalo Vice. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I am a data and AI specialist working in Microsoft. It's a pre-sales role, but most of the time I am doing technical stuff. You have my contact there. You have my blog where I talk about SQL Server, Azure SQL MI, or Azure SQL Database, which are I would say, my services. You have my email, my Twitter. In case that you need anything, just feel free to reach out to me. As one introduction about Azure SQL MI, what is this? Different, I would say, Azure SQL family flavors. You can choose 3 different kind of services. The first one is SQL virtual machine. I mean, it's a machine. It's the same VM that you have in on-premises. The second one, which is the one that I am going to cover today, and the third one, which is Azure SQL Database, which is a database as a service offering in where you can have a database. I mean, you have some differences between them. It's like, hey, when do I choose SQL virtual machine? When do I choose Azure SQL MI or Azure SQL Database? Let's think, or let's say that, for example, let's talk about Azure SQL Database. Hey, Gonzalo, I mean, most of the time I use Azure SQL Database when I have a new project, not a migration itself, but in where you need a database, and that's it. Let's say that you want to innovate. For example, I mean, the difference between having a VM or a service, it's like there are some things that you will not need to do anymore, like, for example, migrations, like, for example, patching, like, for example, I mean, everything that needs to be managed in a VM, you will need, or you will not be need to care about anymore. Like, for example, backups, everything will be covered. But talking about Azure SQL Database, you need a database, and that's it. If you want to do, for example, cross-database queries, in where you have more than one database on the same server, or here we have what we call logical server. The thing for Azure SQL Database is that you need an external service in order to accomplish that cross-database query thing. The same for jobs. Let's say that you use multiple jobs and you want to use them on the service. Well, the thing is, in Azure SQL Database, you need to, as I mentioned, use an external service, which is called Elastic Jobs. The thing is also the maximum space in Azure SQL Database is 4 terabytes. But if you need to scale more, up to 100 terabytes, you will have to use the second option, which is hyperscale. Let me see if I have my SonIT enabled. Let's enable it. So you can see one sec. SonIT. 1 second. Okay, I am opening it. And then we have our Azure SQL MI option. We have the single instance, we have the instance pool. We're going to talk about single instance, a little bit about instance pool, which is a feature which is in preview today. So let's go to the other one, managed solutions. I mean, in case that you choose, for example, a VM, in case that you choose Azure SQL MI or Azure SQL Database or Azure SQL Database for Edge, I mean, these are the things that you will need to care about. Sometimes it's, hey, why I would choose, for example, a VM instead of Azure SQL MI or Azure SQL Database? Why? So the thing is, on the VM side, I mean, you are managing a VM. Yes, if you choose cloud and not on premises, you will not need to care about the virtualization or the hardware or the data center maintenance. You will not need a person inside your data center to do the tape backups and all that stuff. But yes, I mean, it's a VM. I mean, having a VM, it's like you need to maintain your OS. Sometimes you need to also install, for example, antivirus. I heard that a lot, which is not recommended, but I mean, in case that you are using it, you need to maintain it, firewall rules, security itself, as I mentioned, patching, configuration like a storage, or for example, Windows policies, among other things. But if you choose, for example, Azure SQL MI or Azure SQL Database, you will not do that kind of things. But the thing is, when do I need to choose a VM? Well, for example, when you are using features that are not supported today, like in Azure SQL MI or Azure SQL Database file stream or file tables. Or for example, okay, I mentioned about Azure SQL Database Hyperscale that support up to 100 terabytes. But let's say that you need to have more than 100 terabytes. You need to use a VM. Or for example, if you don't want to use Azure SQL Hyperscale, or you have a migration like 10 or 15 terabytes, and you want to do a quick and easy migration, for example, doing a backup and restore, well, I would recommend to use, if you're using more than 16 terabytes, I would recommend to use a VM because you will be able to do backup and restores. But I mean, I will tell you in a few what is the limit in Azure SQL MI. But in case that you find any problem or any feature that it is not supported on the services, well, the best option is to use a VM. Well, today we are talking about, for example, hybrid scenarios in where you have some information or some services on your data center and some services in the cloud and some services in another cloud provider. But let's say that you have a bunch of hardware and you say, hey, I want to use this hardware because I bought it and I want to use it. What are my options? Well, one of the options that you have today is to bring the cloud to your data center. So you can use Azure Arc in order to accomplish or to use Azure Cloud Services. And one of the options of the Azure Arc is Azure SQL MI. So in case that you want to use Azure SQL MI on your data center, you can use Azure Arc. It's an option. Then you can choose. Okay, let's talk about service tiers. When people in cloud normally talk about service tiers, is I would say, compute that you are assigning to your service. In Azure SQL MI, we have two options. One is general purpose, and the other one is business critical. What are the difference between them, or the big differences? Well, first of all, it's about the internal high availability that I'm going to cover that in a few slides later. The other one is the space, because today in general purpose we have in GA or in general availability 16 terabytes. In business critical up today we have 4, but one of the hardware series have up to 16, which is in preview, which is not in GA. We have some other limitations, but I think that one of the biggest one is the internal high availability, in where in general purpose we have a passive node, a passive pool of nodes. So in case that something happen, Azure Fabric automatically will bring this one of these passive nodes to the active node, and there will be a failover, and that's it. Or on the other hand, in the business critical, we have availability group. So let's talk about features. What are the things, what are the differences between Azure SQL MI and, let's say, SQL Server or Azure SQL Database? So from my point of view, one of the huge things in Azure SQL MI is that you will be able to do native backup and restores. What does it mean? Hey, I have a database, I want to migrate it, but I want to use a backup restore. Can I do that? The answer is yes, you can. So the migrations will be honestly very easy, because you will be, restoring databases, and that's it. You don't need to, for example, do ETLs in order to migrate. You don't need to use backpacks to do your migrations. This is amazing. Doing the native backup and restore thing, for me, it's amazing. Another things that I mentioned before, cross-database queries. You don't need to care about external services or to change code in order to do your migration, because you don't need to enable external services nor changing code. Another thing to me is jobs or service broker. Azure SQL MI is almost 100% compatible with your existing SQL Server. So, hey, Gonzalo, I have my SQL Server. I want to migrate it to a service because I want to innovate. What are the things that I need to do? That sometimes it's, hey, I want to migrate this, but I don't want to do too much effort because, I don't have people, or I don't have the provider here that will help me. So what are my options? Well, one of your options is Azure SQL MI, because it's almost 100 compatible with on-premises. And in case that you have, for example, all compatibility levels, for example, in SQL 2012, I would say 2014, or also 2002, and you need to use compatibility level 100, well, you will be able to do that here. So in case that you have a very legacy system and you want to use Azure SQL MI, well, you can change that compatibility level. Among other things, extended events, DMB, blah, 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 blah. So I mentioned that this 100% compatibility with on-premises, there are not too much things not supported. I mentioned file stream or file tables. I also, we will see another limitations, but in terms of features, or for example, the memory temp DB, the new feature, which was released back in 2019. But for the rest, everything is supported. Let's talk about security. Every time that we say cloud and we say security, this is a very important thing. One of the good things is that Azure SQL MI must be built with a VNet, meaning that the service will be close to internet. So in case that you want to connect to Azure SQL MI, you will have to or build everything on the same VNet that you have your managed instance, or do VNet peerings or VNet connections. But the good thing is that the service will be close to internet, which is amazing. So you don't need to care about this. Gonzalo, I want to open the service to internet. Can I do that? The answer is yes. It's recommended. The answer is no. Because it's a service and you don't need to open that service to internet. But in case that you need it, you have the option. So connecting and security. Gonzalo, I migrate my database to the cloud, but I am using the Windows option and it's not working. Okay, yes, the answer is that option as of now is in preview. you will be able to do that option. Not today, but in the future, you will. I mean, yes, if you enable it, you can use it. But as of now, that option is in preview. Otherwise, you can use Azure Active Directory or SQL authentication in order to authenticate to the service itself. What does it mean, Azure Active Directory? Well, for example, you can use service principals, you can use or manage identities, or you can use. I mean, if you want to use Azure Active Directory, you will have to deploy Azure Active Directory. That means that you will be copying your on-premises Active Directory to the cloud, and you will have the same users, but you need to deploy it. This is not by default. Or you can use SQL authentication. You can use also Azure Key Vault in order to save or store the password. And then you can just call the Azure Key Vault and just to get the password in order to connect from your app. I mentioned this about security. Again, some additional things about these size options or these service tiers. So every time that you hear service tier, you think about, hey, what will be the compute that my service will have? And that's it. Instead of, for example, assigning, yes, you will be assigned Beacon, but the thing is, every time that you need to assign resources to your service tiers will be your answer. Hey, what will be my service tier? And then you can think about how many Beacons I am going to assign. Some things that I want to mention, for example, the max number of databases. Why do I mention this? This is because, sometimes we have projects or we have customers that create databases based on their number of clients or number of customers. For example, here I have a new customer, new database. I have a new customer, database, and so on, so on, so on. So the limit today is 100 user databases. And then, well, we have some other limitations on the max number of files, the data file size, among other things. But the most important thing is, I think, that is the database limit, just in case you have this scenario in where you create multiple databases per instance. So just keep an eye on that. Gonzalo, sometimes in the on-premises side, I know how many IOPS do I have because based on the number of, for example, disks, I know based on the write that I choose, I know that particular system can have up to a fixed number of IOPS. What will be the IOPS thing in Azure SQL MI? Well, here's the thing. We need to talk about general purpose. We need to talk about business critical in very separate ways. In general purpose, on the storage side, Azure SQL MI is pointing to a remote storage account, meaning that you will not have the same performance that you will have in business critical. By default, in general purpose, the number of IOPS will depend on the size of each of the database files. This would not depend on the entire instance size, for example, that if you choose more Beacons, you will choose more IOPS, like it will happen in business critical, because the number of IOPS in business critical will depend on the number of Beacons that you assign. But on the other hand, in general purpose, the number of IOPS will depend on the size of each of the database files. That will be data and that will be logs. The answer is yes, because it's per database file. So if you're using general purpose and you're having, for example, IO weights like page IO last or IO completion, and any weight related to IO, and you say, hey, something is going on, I am monitoring the DMBs, and I am seeing that the IO, where we are having IO pressure and where is in general purpose, what can I do? Well, what you can do is this one, is to increase the database file, increase the data file, increase the log file. Obviously, if you increase the database file, you will need more space, or you will have to assign more space to the service in case that you don't have it. But let's say that your database is, 10 gig, 100 gig, and you are getting 500 IOPS per file. So the thing is, hey, Gonzalo, I need more IOPS. I discover that my problem, my bottleneck is IOPS. Okay, you will have to increase your database up to or greater than 128. and you will get more jobs automatically. This is per file. So if you have a problem on the data side, or if you have a problem on the log side and you need more jobs, you will have to increase. If you have the problem in both, you will have to increase both. Otherwise, you will have to increase the data or the log one, or the one that you are having issues. Gonzalo, you know that in on-premise, sorry, I am getting question and answer. Yes, I am a little crazy, I know that. But the thing is, I mean, the kind of question that I receive very often when I talk about Azure SQL MI. You know, in on-premises, I use multiple files because I am using partitioning. Can I do that? The answer is yes, you can. You can have multiple files per file group. So in case that you want to add more jobs and add more files just to distribute the load, you can use that. You can do that. I talk about backups. I talk about responsibilities on the services. Hey, I mean, sometimes we do a kind of things. We maintain different systems. We maintain different databases, and sometimes we want to know, hey, if I move to this kind of offering, what will be my responsibility? You know that I work every day and I receive a bunch of tickets or emails saying, hey, the backup is not working. Or also I am monitoring that backups are happening, because I mean, for legal regulation, we need to ensure that the backups are happening. So what will be my responsibility if I use Azure SQL MI? So the thing is, this responsibility is on us. I mean, Microsoft will execute the backups for you. You can monitor them. In Azure SQL Database, there is a new DMB that you can query in order to get that data. In Azure SQL MI, you can use or extended events, or you can use also, well, I will not say the portal, because the thing on the portal is that you will know what is the latest snapshot that you can restore. But as of now, you can use extended events in order to get that data. But the thing is, I mean, this is on us. This is our responsibility. But the thing is, Gonzalo, you know that I saw on the portal that my default retention for the backups is 7 days, but I need 5 years. How can I do that? Can I do that? The answer is yes, you can. You can enable a feature which is called long-term backup retention that will allow you to save your backups for up to 10 years in case that you have a legal requirement that you need to follow in order to save the backup for more than 35 days, which is the maximum by default. You can use the long-term backup retention, but this is on us. For example, Gonzalo, you know, I have a legal requirement that in my country, I need to store the backups in an on-premises location because of legal requirement. What can I do? That is very often question that I receive, because in my country we don't have, I would say, a data center or an Azure region. So what can we do? Well, what you can do is just execute an ad hoc backup and store it on an URL. So afterwards, you can download it to your local data center. Can you do that? The answer is yes, absolutely. You can execute your ad hoc backup using copy-only clause. But, well, I will talk about this in a few more slides, that you will be able to restore backups in a SQL Server. Replication. I know that there is a bunch of people that loves replication. Transactional is supported. So let's say, that you want to use replication, but you want to use a distributor or as a publisher or a subscriptor. Can you do that? The answer is yes. You can use replication on any of the different flavors that can be publisher, distributor, or subscriptor. Gonzalo, I saw that on the site it's in preview. Is that true? The answer is yes, it's in preview. When this will be in GA, honestly, I work in Microsoft and I saw that question coming all the time. So honestly, I don't have the answer for that. I think that it's soon, but honestly, I don't have that answer in case that you have it. Because sometimes in different companies, I know that, it's not allowed to use preview features. Because, we have, or the companies have different standards that, hey, if you're going to use the cloud, just use features in GA. That is why I answered that question. Service broker, database mail, both are supported. But let's say that you are in the situation that, hey, Gonzalo, I need more resources. I discovered that I need more beacons because we have a very special day, for example, hot sale and all that stuff, or Black Friday. And we need to use more power. What can we do? Can we add more resources? The answer is yes, you can, unless you reach the limit of 80 cores. But the thing is, what will be the impact? We work in technology. We know that if we change something, there will be an impact. So what will be the impact here? Okay, you know that you can control the number of beacons that you assign to a service, but you don't control the memory, because if you choose a fixed number of beacons, you will have 5.1 as of today in GA of memory. So if you choose 4 beacons, you will have 20 gigabytes of memory. I explained you that if you are using business critical, you will have more IOPS based on the number of records, which is awesome, which is I don't need to care about extending my database in order to get more IOPS. But how long it will take to do that movement, or to do to add more resources to my service? The thing in Azure SQL MI is that as of today, building an Azure SQL MI will take up to 3 to 6 hours. But what about if I need to scale up? Will that be the same time? The answer is depends. Obviously, if you are using business critical, it will be a very different architecture inside. So it will take time. That can be hours. In general purpose, we have a different architecture, so maybe it will take less because you don't have this availability group, this multiple number of nodes, so it will take less time. My recommendation is test the process before going live, or if you have a lower environment like Q&A or QA or test or dev or whatever you have, just test the process. Hey, if I'm going to add 4 more beacons, 8 more beacons, okay, how long it will take? So at least you are prepared, and you know that if you need to do that, the time that will take is 1 hour, 2 hours, and that's it. Instance pool, I mentioned this at the very beginning. This feature is if you are thinking of having multiple Azure SQL MIs but pay for a single one. Let's say that you have your development team where you have multiple applications, and you want to use Azure SQL MI dev because you need to test something. You are not going to test in prod. Please don't do that. Believe me that I saw it a bunch of time. People that, hey, but I am using production as dev, and the question is why? No, but no problem. I am using a different database. Yes, but you are sharing resources. If you execute a very heavy process, you are going to use the production resources. It's like, why? So please don't do that. This in Azure SQL MI. The option that you have today in a dev environment is to pay for, let's say, 16 beacons, but internally you use multiple Azure SQL MIs in order to, to use multiple instances, so your dev teams can work and you pay for a single instance. This is in preview as well, but this is a very good option in case that you want to use multiple Azure SQL MIs for dev. Some limitations, not issues, some more other things. You can go to the links. I will send this to Mike in case that you want to check this. And a magical word, I would say, which is cost. All the time I talk about cost. How can we save cost? What can we do in order to save cost? What are our options? So there is something called Azure Hybrid Benefit, in where you can move your on-premises license from on-premises to the cloud. That will save around 40% of the cost of the service. But Gonzalo, you told me that this is a service. Why do I need to pay license? So here's the thing. If you're using this benefit, you are not going to pay license. You are not going to pay this 40% of the license cost because you are moving that license from on-prem or from, let's say, an Azure VM, because you are moving, because you want to innovate and you want to use service. So you will be able to save up to 40%. So, But also, if I need to calculate how many licenses will I have? I mean, if you have your existing license and you are moving to the cloud, I mean, you are using that license and that's it. Because by default, I know that licensing thing sometimes is a headache, but in SQL Server, every time that you purchase a license, you are purchasing a 2 beaker license. So if you're using your on premises and you're using 8 beakers, you're going to pay obviously for licenses because you have 2 beakers per license. And if you are moving to Azure SQL MI, you can move that license to Azure SQL MI. But in case that you have available licenses on the volume licensing center and you want to apply this benefit, you can use here, you have the Azure Hybrid Benefit Calculator link, in where you can calculate how many licenses you will need. For example, Gonzalo, I have my enterprise edition licenses and I want to use general purpose. How many beakers will I have? Okay, by default, as you can see here, you will need, if you have a 2 beaker enterprise license edition, you can use up to 4 beakers in general purpose. So if you are using, or if you have an enterprise edition license in on-premises, obviously a SQL Server one, and you want to use general purpose, you can use up to 4 beakers of general purpose. But what if I want to use business critical? Okay, you can use 1 beaker. So in case that you want to use a 4 beaker business critical, you will require at least 2 licenses, because 2 licenses of 2 beakers is 4, and that's it. I know that sometimes this is not easy, but you have the calculator and you have my contact in case that you want to reach out to me and you have any question about licenses, I will help you. I don't have any problem. Well, savings, percentage, blah, 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 that's it. So let's talk about reservations. Gonzalo, you know that I saw on the Azure calculator that I can use something called reservation. What is that? So basically, it's a commitment in where, I mean, you say, hey, I am going to use Azure or this particular service for 1 year or for 3 years. So if you commit and you create a reservation that you will say, hey, on this subscription, I am going to use a managed instance of 4 beakers, 8 beakers, 16 beakers, or whatever you're going to use. It's a commitment that you are saying, hey, I'm going to use this. So because of that, you can save 33% more. But if you combine the reservation with the Azure Hybrid Benefit, it can be at up to 80%. So you need to go to the portal. I will show you. I mean, I don't have permissions to do that on my subscription, but I can show that to you. How to do that at least. And that's it. If you want to save cost, I mean, you can use these two. Azure Hybrid Benefit or reservation. The reservation, you can pay it monthly or you can pay it in one time, and that's it. High availability, very important thing today, high availability. I have a session about high availability where I cover, all of the different flavors about high availability. But what are our options? We have something which is by default on the service. Every time that you say, hey, I want to use business critical or general purpose, I have 2 different options, which is by default. This is how we are protecting your service, or just ensure that the service will be up in case that something happens. General purpose, let's say that you're familiar with log shipping, that you're familiar with mirroring. This is 2022 and I'm talking about all features, I know. But I know also that these features are still being used. I love log shipping. In fact, one of the services that we have to migrate, which is log replace services in Azure SQL MI, is built on log shipping. I love log shipping. This is one of the powerful tools that I use to migrate different databases. But let's talk about the default internal HA, sorry. So general purpose, as I mentioned before, you will have a pool of active nodes and redundant nodes or passive nodes. So if something happens, automatically there will be a failover. What does it mean? Let's say that, for example, this node goes down. So I mean, Azure Service Fabric will detect this issue and will say, hey, something happened here. I need to bring one of these redundant nodes from the passive node to the active nodes part or the active nodes pool. What will happen? Well, there will be a failover from this one to this one. It will remove this node from the pool directly, and it will move one of the passive nodes to the active node, and that's it. So, I mean, in the middle, during this movement, there will be obviously a downtime because we will be doing failovers, but this will be a couple of seconds, honestly. Can you test this? I mean, is there any way that you can test this internal high availability? The answer is yes. You can use PowerShell in order to simulate this failover. What's about business critical? I told you before that, I mean, there is a difference between on the storage side between general purpose and business critical. As you can see here, that we got super fast SSDs on each of the replicas. But what is the technology behind business critical? Well, it's something that you know, which is availability group. You have 4 nodes by default, but I mean, you know that in availability group, you can enable something called read routing, in where you do some magic, some configuration, and automatically or automagically, the session will go to the secondary. If that session is a read-only session, you can use two connection string attributes in order to get this. One is application intent read-only, meaning that the connection will be read-only, and that's it. And the other one is the database or the initial catalog, in where you say, hey, this connection will be a read-only one, and we want to connect to this database in order to do this operation. I mean, can you do that in Azure SQL My Business Critical? The answer is yes. Do I need to do anything to enable this? The answer is no. This is by default. You are not going to pay anything extra on having this. But Gonzalo, you know, I am using 4 beacons on the primary. I mean, will I impact the primary if I do this? I'm going to use resources from the primary. The answer is no. You will have, if you have 4 beacons on the primary, you will have 4 beacons on the secondary. Compute and resources will be different. So you don't need to care about impacting the primary. But I mean, what will happen if something happens? What can we do? Well, so here is availability group. If something happens here, there will be a failover. And then Azure Service Fabric will add again a new node to the architecture itself. That is the good thing, that you don't need to care about anything. Again, during this process, will there be any downtime? The answer is yes, because it's availability group. As of now, as of today, every time that you do failovers or there are automatic failovers, there are downtime, because today the technology doesn't support that you can do failovers without having downtime. So, I mean, this will be, again, a couple of seconds, but there will be. Well, but let's say, I mean, here you are protecting your service on the same region, on the same zone. But Gonzalo, you know that I heard that in Azure SQL database, you can use different zones for the same service, meaning that, for example, you have these 2 in one zone, this in another zone, and this one in another zone. Can I use the same here? The answer is no. As of now, that feature is not supported. I mean, you cannot have multiple zones for the same service. Will this be available? The answer is stay tuned. But we talk about having the service on the same region, on the same zone. But what if I want to protect my service to a different region? Let's say that you are in North Europe and you want to use a different zone. Can I do that? The answer is yes. You can use something called auto failover group, that I covered this in another session very deeply with some examples and some internals. The thing is, I mean, I don't want to talk about a bunch of auto failover group, but the thing is, the service will be protected, I mean, you will have another region, a different region, and if something happens to the primary region, there will be a failover, and you can go to the secondary region, and that's it. We can talk about this in another um, session. News and what is coming. You will see that all the time there are new things in Azure SQL MI. All the time. The team is doing an amazing job adding more and more features. But what is the new thing? Okay, let's say that, for example, you want to, or you use Azure SQL MI, but you say, hey, it will be great if I can do a near real-time system, but using a VM. What can I do? So one of the announcements of SQL Server 2022 is that you will be able to have a near real-time replication within your VM in Azure or in on-premises to Azure SQL MI. You will be able to connect these two worlds. You can use, or you can connect them using something called the Suite Availability Group. This is a feature that was released back in SQL 2016. But the good thing is that you will be able to have a near real time between your SQL Server in on-premises or infrastructure as a service to Azure SQL MI. Another thing is, hey, but wait. Well, this one is the Azure SQL MI link that you will see. I mean, as of now, you can have two different systems. I will show you in a few. You can fail over just to do almost real-time migration, but you will not be able to fail back in case that you want to switch between them today. Only failover is supported, not fail back. But let's say that, Gonzalo, you know that, I mean, I don't want to use Azure SQL MI anymore. You know, I want to go back to on-premises because I want it, or because I mean I want to go back to an Azure VM. What can I do? Well, starting SQL Server 2022, backing up and restoring an Azure SQL MI database will be supported. So in case that you want to fail back to your VM or to your on-premises VM, you will be able to. That is another very beautiful announcement. New hardware series. I mean, by default, the standard one, which is the Gen 5, allows you to have up to 5.1 gigabytes of memory. But there are some new hardware series. They both are in preview that will give you more memory. It will use a new hardware processor model. But the good thing is that, I mean, today we can't choose. I know that, for example, I saw some systems that are using, for example, 8 vCores and 64 gigabytes of memory. Can you do that here? The answer is no, because you can't choose a fixed amount of memory today in Azure SQL MI. So by default, you will have a fixed number of memory. On the new hardware series, you will have more gigabytes per vCore, and you can scale up to 870 gigabytes of memory. So in case that you want more, you can have it. But these one are in preview today. Well, parallel backup and improvement on the backup side, additional announcement. You have here the information in case that you want to check it. You can use the link. Since I have 15 minutes, let's go to the demo part. So, I mean, this is very simple. This is the portal in case that you never see it. Here you have, I mean, you can or click as I did, or you can search it here, SQL Managed Instances, as you can see here. You can create it, or you can just click create. And then here, I mean, these are the options that you can, or that you will have to choose. Resource group, a name, Mike Fox. Then you can configure the compute plus the storage. Here I mentioned the premium series that you can see here versus the standard. I mean, the premium series are not available on all of the region. So in case that you don't see it, maybe it's because that region is not supporting the new hardware series. And here you have general purpose, business critical. Here you can choose the storage. Here, the benefit that I mentioned before, I should have the benefit, and you say, hey, yes, I have the licenses, I confirm this. You can have redundancy on the backup side. For example, what does it mean? Hey, Gonzalo, I choose geo redundant backup storage. What does it mean? Well, it means that if you're executing, if Microsoft is executing the backups in a region, automatically this will be copied to a different region. So in case that something happened, you can restore it from there. In case that something happened to the region and you don't have auto failover group enabled, you can restore your backup on the other region. You click apply, and then here authentication method. You can, I would say, force the service to use only Azure Active Directory in case that, let's say that you say, by default, our standard is Azure Active Directory. We don't want to use SQL authentication. Can we do that? The answer is yes. Can you roll back that change afterwards? The answer is yes as well. You can also, configure the service to use SQL again, authentication. Well, here you can use, this user is like the SA in SQL Server that you can configure, for example, Gonzalo, password, blah, blah, blah. Networking. I mentioned about VNet. So here you will have to, you can use an existing VNet or you can use a new one. If you already configure a VNet and a subnet, obviously being on the requirements that this VNet needs, you will see it here. Otherwise, you can create a new one. Another thing, I saw a bunch of applications not using 1.2. Can you use another version? The answer is yes. Is it recommended? The answer is no. But in case that your application or your different reports are using an old TLS version, you can do that. You can use that. Is recommended? No, but you can do that. Security, you can use Microsoft Defender in order to get recommendations, in order to get different additional security features. Identity, in case, by default it's enabled, but in case that you want to use an identity for the Azure SQL MI and connect to other services using this system managed identity, you can use that. Additional settings here, very important thing, Gonzalo, I use a different collection. Can I change it? The answer is yes. You can just click here, and here you can find the collection that you need to use. But I use a different time zone. I am in Netherlands, and I want to use my time zone. What can I do? Well, you can choose here your Netherlands time zone. Boom, that's it. Auto failover group, I mentioned that. Here we have the tags. Also, I saw this. What can I do? What can I use this for? Well, for example, I normally use tags, for example, when I want to know, hey, who is the owner of the service? Who is the responsible for the service? What is the cost collector for this service? What is the environment? What are the contacts that I can reach out to in order to get information about this service? Well, I use tags for that, because then you can use PowerShell, or you can use the Azure CLI in order to get this data and very quickly, for example, create reports in order to say, hey, based on the service, who is the owner? And that's it. In case that you need to contact anyone, boom, you can use the tags. Review and create, you click create, boom, this will start up to 3 to 6 hours, depending on the service tier, depending on the size, well, you know that. After that, after this magic happens, what will happen? Well, boom, you will see your service, as you can see, ready. So what is the important thing? If you're starting with Azure SQL MI and you want to connect to Azure SQL MI, you will have to use this one here, host. This one is the endpoint that you will need to use in order to connect to Azure SQL MI. As you can see here, I am using not the latest in preview, but I am using the latest, at least GA version of Azure SQL MI, for SQL Server Management Studio. The latest one is 19.2, but it is in preview. This one is the latest in GA. It's very easy to connect. You click here, boom, you connect to Azure SQL MI. And then you will see almost the same things that you are seeing on premises or in a VM normally in Azure. You can right-click, click properties. What are the things that you can change? I mean, can you change the memory? The answer is no. But for example, you want to change the instance max DOP, as you can see here. Can you change this? The answer is yes. You can change also the code threshold for parallelism. You can change the optimize for other workloads, and I will show you that I am not lying to you. You click 8, boom, click OK, and that's it. Gonzalo, I want to change some things or some properties on the database. Can I do that? The answer is yes, you can. Right-click properties, and you will see the different options that you can change. For example, hey, Gonzalo, I migrated this whole database and I realized that 10% is being used on auto-growth configuration. Can I change that? The answer is yes, you can. You can do this. Let's say that you are using 256, boom, and you can click OK, boom, that's it, you can change it. What other options can I change? Well, for example, you can come here, you can click options. And why I am not seeing compatibility level here? Well, it's a simple answer, because here I am using 160, which is SQL Server 2022. That is why you are not seeing this. That compatibility level will be enabled, or it's enabled now on the preview 19.2 of Management Studio, but it is not yet enabled on this 18.11. Can you change this? Yes, as I am seeing. Okay, click OK, boom, you change it. That's it. You have a legacy system and you want to use this old compatibility level, you can do that. What will be the impact? Again, change equals to impact. Well, as of now, you will not be able to use the latest feature. For example, all the intelligent query processing features, well, you will not be able to use those. But as you can see, you can change this. Or in case that you want to, for example, use the latest compatibility level, which is SQL 2022, you will have to use the code. What is the code? Alter database. And the name, which is AdventureWorks 2019. And then, set compatibility level equal, no, this one have a different, equals from 60, and here I need to choose, I think this, no. Yes. And that's it. You will change the compatibility level to use the latest one. TempDB, Gonzalo, you know that TempDB sometimes is a headache. I want to add more files. I want to manage that. Can I do that? The answer is no as of now. Because this one is by default, you cannot change the configuration for TempDB. But at least you know that all the files are being built automatically. Gonzalo, you mentioned jobs. Is that true or it's not? Okay, let's create a new job. Microx. Boom, I create a job. That's it. What else? Well, you have management here in where you can create extended event sessions. You can, for example, check if something is going on the logs. You can open them and you will see, hey, something is going internally, or is there any issue or something? Or I just want to check the log in order to see if everything is fine. Well, you can use this one. Let me show you one sec. I can remember if manager. Let me see. I can remember if I start up my SQL. I want to show you the Azure SQL. Yes, my Azure SQL MI link. Well, it's busy. Nice. I have 4 minutes. I will show you the MI link and let's see if we have any question. Come on. Well, as you can see, for example, the backups, as I mentioned, and some data that you can check. Stop. So now let me show you my VM, and you will see here, this is my local VM. As you can see, there is no different. This one is a SQL 2019 CU15, and here you have the Azure SQL MI. As you can see, it's almost the same. You are seeing exactly the same things. But in my case, I want to show you this little guy here, that we have distribute availability group of this database, and we are replicating in almost real time. Let me show you the dashboard. I need to log in, but I will not show you that because that will take some time. I wanted to show you that I am replicating my VM, which is this one, to Azure SQL MI, as you can see. So if I am going here, use Adventure Works, create table, my rows. If everything is working fine, and honestly, I didn't check it, I will be honest with you. But let's do a live demo and see what happened. And as you can see, I am on the Azure SQL MI, and I am seeing the table. So what if insert into my rocks values 1, 2, and 3. And if I go to here, I am not lying to you, 1, 2, 3. And it's like it's almost real time that we are replicating. Let's say that we want to initialize this. What will be the process? Well, behind bars, automatic seeding will be used in order to synchronize both of them. That will, if you are having a big database, maybe that takes time. But anyway, I mean, we can talk about that in another HA session. So I think that I have questions. Is there any question, Mike?
Hi, Gonzalo. No, I haven't seen any questions until now, so let me just check the specific comments. No, there aren't any questions. I think your session was very clear for everyone.
Okay, sir. So again, thank you very much, people, for being here. Thank you very much, Mike, for having me here. It was a pleasure. Let's stay in touch for future sessions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your presentation, Gonzalo. It was a very clear presentation about Azure SQL and the options you have. Especially great to see that you have a near to real time demonstration of moving your stuff through a managed instance. So thank you for being at our user group, and I hope to see you next time as well.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.